Alrighty, so I know this one is one that's been going on for a while, but I'm still seeing it, so we're gonna talk about it. What are we talking about? The TikTok art lore ridiculousness. Before we get into that, let's talk about the art. This one is the design that I have for the Pokemon print for Hawthorne. I really like how this turned out. I wanted to use this footage in another video. I think this turned out really cute, especially with the Raichu and the Leopard. I really enjoyed this and the end result. I'm still working on the others. They will pop up before too long. It just takes me a little bit to get each of them done in a timely manner. So I wanted to show this one again, especially because Hawthorne's very cute. He's Thunder Element, so I had to give him an Alolan Raichu. And I'm really looking forward to when I can do these as prints. So, with that out of the way, let's get back to the topic. So the TikTok art lore stuff. Boy, there's a reason I don't really post to the TikTok art community. I have 3 posts on there, and only 3 posts, and I tend to avoid it because the toxicity is real, oh my good golly gosh. So if I brought up art lore, what would you expect to learn about? Maybe the backstory of a piece, the story behind someone's artistic journey, maybe how somebody developed their style, or the idea for a story that they absolutely love. No, that's not it at all. The TikTok art lore is all about bullying and toxicity and attacking people, usually beginners, for mistakes or poor anatomy or having the wrong art style, etc. Now, the frustration of this, to me at least, is the way it breaks down and attacks artists who may be starting out, or just learning, or maybe just excited and trying to share their ideas and pictures online. And this is not a bad thing, so why are people getting attacked for it? Now, one of the first things that pops up, that I think of at least, is that you've got the issue of fixing people's art. Now, I've always had an issue with that sort of thing, and honestly, it may get a discussion video of its own eventually. But here's the gist of why I don't like the whole fixing art thing. Now, it's one thing if someone asks for critique and they're being shown maybe a new composition that may have worked better, or a different lighting technique, or assistance with a technical skill issue that they need to work on. If they ask for it, that's one thing. Like, I've seen people, a good example is the Art Mentor here on YouTube. People will submit their art to them, and he'll go over it and maybe see things that he thinks could be done a little better or improved. And that's one thing, because they chose to submit their art, they asked for this critique, and they get a very good one that's not tearing down their skill level, but showing them new ways and things that they can do. That's not a bad thing, that is a good thing. And that's a very positive way, so not every way of quote-unquote fixing art is bad. However, the trend tends to encompass completely unsolicited advice, as well as people fixing things that they personally deem as quote-unquote ugly or undesirable in the piece. It could be a legitimate stylistic choice by the original artist, it could be an anatomy mistake. But regardless of that, and whether or not something is a technical issue or an actual mistake, the problem is that it's done in bad faith, and in a way that's very insulting to the original artist, and it was completely unsolicited. Like, I'm sorry, if somebody's not asking for it, leave somebody's art alone. Don't go through a thing of trying to fix it. That's very insulting and very rude. And it also makes the person who's deciding they need to fix someone else's art honestly look really arrogant, because I know better than you. And it's a little bit ridiculous, and we need to stay away from that, honestly, as a whole. But getting on to the rest of the issue, aside from fixing other people's art, the whole thing is, honestly, from what I've seen, just bullying. You get callouts for being quote-unquote bad artists. Guys, beginners are going to have bad art. Heck, professionals have quote-unquote bad art. The difference is professionals tend to just post their good art from their portfolio, unless they're showing how they fixed something in an old piece. For every good piece of art you see, there are tons and tons of bad drawings that somebody has done. And without those bad drawings, they're not going to get to a better skill level. The community has become so toxic at this point, with so many younger artists terrified to share their work, despite the fact that sharing their work to a positive community could honestly lead to faster improvement. And it's just sad to see that the community has become something that people are afraid to contribute to and post to. And just a quick side note, I really hate the "it builds character" and "it's just criticism" arguments that the people being so toxic and aggressive immediately go to when called out. You don't have to be a jerk to give criticism. That doesn't build character, it just makes people not want to create, or at the very least not want to post, and therefore not seek out potential criticism and feedback that could help them improve faster in the way that by your words you clearly want them to, but by your actions you don't. And frankly, it wouldn't, unalive people to just calm down a little bit. And on top of that, especially with the nature of TikTok itself, with scrolling through and the short form content and the way you can browse just by scrolling, you can just scroll past if you don't like someone's art. Why are people going out of their way to just attack people and call specific people out every time they see something they don't like? This is a major problem in a lot of areas of the internet that I have noticed getting worse and worse. Which is frustrating because that didn't really used to be how it was, and yes, I'm old, I can talk about the good old days of the internet, where you could find AMVs on YouTube, and quizzes on Quizilla with the sparkly things at the end. But people used to just mostly, on fanfiction.net for example, don't like, don't read. That was a big thing, and for the most part people did that. If they didn't like something, they'd just scroll past it, or they'd just leave it alone. There's no point in having to attack people, and I don't understand why people feel they have to attack people. Another issue that I tend to have with it is the tearing down of whole general aesthetics of certain art style. Like the whole quote-unquote pro-shipper art style that people get accused of if they have a kind of soft and more cute chibi-ish style. Like, no? Just because there were prominent pro-shippers who drew similarly doesn't mean that any comparable art style is a pro-shipper art style. Some people just like cute things and chibi styles, so no. And especially because pro-shippers don't own an art style. And a side note, I refuse to get into the whole anti and pro-shipper stuff. Just no, not doing it. I wouldn't have even mentioned it if it hadn't been relevant and something that was directly popping up among all of this. Anyway, just because some people don't like a style doesn't make it wrong to draw in it. Y'all aren't the style police, so calm down maybe? For example, one thing that I saw discourse around not too long ago was people were calling it a chicken scratch art style, where lines weren't all smooth, they were gone back over several times, it had more of a messy look. For one thing, a lot of people draw like that. But for another thing, guys, look at the art in some classic children's books. A great example, honestly, is the art and illustrations in the Phantom Tollbooth. More scratchy and less smooth art can have its own appeal and be important. Different art styles all have their place, and just because you don't like it, well, that means you don't like it. It doesn't mean that it's wrong and bad to draw in. Just because you don't like something in general doesn't mean it's wrong. I don't like coleslaw. Does that make coleslaw wrong? No, it just means I don't like coleslaw. That's just how it goes. So different things are going to appeal to different people and will still have their place and be important. And honestly, the way that all of this leads to artists hating their old art is disheartening. It should be a nice thing to look back at your old art and be able to see just how far you've come. Everything that you've learned and learned to apply in your art, you should be able to look back on that and be proud. And be proud of your younger self for coming to this point from where you were. older art shouldn't be something you have to lock away and hide and not let anyone see because, oh gosh, if anyone found this, I'll become the next artlore. And it's frustrating because seeing people's progress, at least to me, is inspiring because you can see where these really good artists came from, where they started from, and it makes things feel a lot more attainable because you look at these other artists who are so skilled and talented now, and you look back at their old work and you see they weren't so different from me. They weren't so different from other people. That makes things feel that much more attainable and wonderful and inspiring. Another thing that I've noticed, though, and this is a slightly different note, is that there's a bit of a trend that a lot of the people who make these artlore videos on TikTok tend to have what, by their own standards, would be deemed as not super great art themselves. And I do think that's a contributor. I think that's a big contributor to the whole thing, because it's not unusual for people who feel inadequate to try and tear others down, especially if they perceive them as having maybe slightly better but still quote-unquote bad art than them. That's not unusual, but that doesn't make it good. Bringing other artists down is not going to make them improve, and even if it makes the troll feel better for a little while, it's just going to be a short-lived feeling that honestly starts a vicious cycle of going back and forth and attacking other artists in a desperate bid to make themselves feel better when they could be putting that energy toward practicing and they'd get better faster, or good-spirited and good faith critique that could lead to improvement on both sides, as well as possibly building a more positive community. Now, I do think that all this is finally dying down a little bit. I haven't seen it as much, but I still think that it's important to talk about, because if we don't, then there's just a risk of it coming back around again, and it being one of those things that's just going to appear in a cycle, like with references or tracing or any other art drama that comes up. It's calming down now, but if we don't acknowledge it and make note of it, it will come back around again. Art is supposed to be fun and enjoyable. A more supportive and kind community is going to uplift everybody, as well as honestly lead to more people improving and seeking out critique and feedback, because they don't have to be afraid of the fact that they might not receive feedback, they might receive an attack. And I think we ought to just be kind. Okay, so what do you guys think? Do you have any thoughts on the whole artlore thing? And what do you think of how the toxicity has gotten in the community? Do you have any thoughts on it? Do you think it's worse than it used to be? Do you think it's the same, but people are noticing it more? I'd like to hear what you guys think down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, maybe leave a like, and if you want to see more from me, maybe think about subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and a big thank you to my patrons on Patreon, Inside Chaos, Salmon, and Creativa Artly. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and take care of yourselves. Bye!